Dust pressed against the windows of the gilded Spur saloon, blurring lamps into halos. Luke Harper stood in the doorway, boots ringing iron on cracked boards. 30 summers of ranch work had pared him lean. Grief had pared him quiet. He came for supplies and one slow beer, not for spectacle. Laughter pulled him deeper. A crowd ringed the parlor like vultures round a carcass. In the center waited a wicker chair, its occupant wrapped in ivory lace gone the color of bone. She sat straight despite the chair's sagging back. Hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing each man could name. Below the blanket, her legs lay still, boots laced but useless. Poker chips rattled. "Birthday present, Harper," someone jeered. A clerk shoved a marriage license across the felt. Luke's forged signature already drying in black ink. Luke's pulse ticked once. He counted faces. 3 ranch hands drunk on boredom. 2 drummers eager for chaos. The circuit judge bought by a bottle of rye. None carried shame. The judge cleared his throat, voice thin. "Do you, Luke Harper?" Luke raised a palm. "Name first." His words scattered smoke. The woman's lips moved, software steel under snow. "Evangeline." A hush fell, sudden and strange. The judge finished vows none would remember. A borrowed ring, warm from another hand, slid onto Evangeline's finger. Cheap applause fluttered, then snapped into cackles. Coins clinked onto the floorboards. "Take her home, Cowboy. See if she can ride," a man barked. Someone spat whiskey near Luke's boot. He crouched. Close now, he saw the rope bruises on her ankles, the tremor in her knuckles where effort met pain. Yet her gaze held level, unbroken. Luke stood, gathered blanket and bride alike, and stepped into the night. Behind him, laughter shrank to a stain that moonlight could not bleach. Cold air tasted of iron, stars scattered, merciless and clear. Luke eased Evangeline across the saddle, mounted behind, and turned the gelding toward Sparrow Creek. 6 miles of scrub and silence. She weighed almost nothing. When the horse jolted, she gripped the pommel with white fingers. A wince crossed her eyes but slipped away before it finished forming. Luke steadied her with a forearm, said nothing. At the creek ford, a coyote yipped. Evangeline's breath hitched. Luke felt the small shift of her shoulders and wondered how long fear had been her shadow. They reached the ranch near midnight. 1 low house, 1 leaning barn, fences like tired arms holding nothing but memory. He carried her inside, laid her on the narrow bed once shared with nobody, and stoked the stove until it glowed. Snowmelt water cooled in a tin cup. She sipped in measured swallows, hands shaking only when she thought he did not watch. He positioned a chair by the hearth, arranging blankets so her legs would not suffer night's bite. Still no words, only the slow settle of fireside light on 2 strangers, stitched together by mockery. Luke unrolled a pallet on the floor. Wind hissed through chinks in the wall. Coyotes traded secrets across the ridge. Evangeline stared at the ceiling, face calm, eyes awake. He did not ask if she needed anything. She would voice need when need won that quiet battle inside her chest. Sleep slipped round them both, thin and brittle. Dawn bled faint over winter grass. Luke rose, boiled coffee, then set a basin on the stove. He found Evangeline already propped on elbows, studying the room as though mapping new territory. Without speaking, he lifted her carefully to the chair. She watched every motion, measuring intent. She pointed to the basin. Luke carried it to her lap, helped guide numb hands to the cloth. Steam ghosted between them. She bathed her face, neck, wrists, slow work, but deliberate. When finished, she met his eyes, nodded once. A bargain sealed. He saddled the gelding, left to check fence line. Miles of wind, wire, rust. His mind replayed the jeers, the forged ink, the flash of courage in winter river eyes. Back home near noon, he found the bed made, blanket folded with military corners. A tin plate rested on the table. Half a biscuit, split so he'd know the portion meant for him. She had dragged herself with arms alone. Floorboards bore faint scuffs where boots slid. She sat at the hearth, cheeks flushed from effort. Pain hid behind composure. Tight lines at the mouth, a breath caught too long. Yet she offered what might have been a thanks or merely recognition. She lifted the cup toward him, steady despite tremor. Luke ate in silence. Outside, wind rattled an empty feed bucket against the post. Hollow clang, lonely rhythm. He fetched 2 cedar planks, hammered them across the threshold to widen the step, then built a ramp smooth enough for a chair. He said nothing of the work. That evening, Evangeline traced the fresh grain with her fingertips, and Luke saw her shoulders ease by the width of a sigh. 3 days shaped a pattern. He rose before light, tended stock, returned to find task completed, dishes washed, bullets polished on cloth, a red ribbon tied round the lamp so glass would not crack when frost snapped. She moved across the floor, trailing determination like a veil. On the 4th morning, he caught her inching along the wall, body trembling from waist down. She attempted 1 step, legs refused. She sank, palms burning against the plank seam, breath ragged, eyes wet. Luke knelt beside her, offered an arm. She pushed it away, jaw set. Inch by inch, she dragged herself back to the chair. Failure settled over the room, heavy as wet wool. Luke fetched a small block of maple, the one he carved idle evenings. He placed it on her lap. She turned it over. A horse, half-shaped, legs missing. She looked at him, puzzled. He set a carving knife beside the block, then returned to mending tack. After a long time, the scrape of blade met the hush. Shavings dusted the blanket, rose like snow. Storms boiled from the north. Wind howled through chinks Luke could not fix in one winter. He pulled Evangeline's chair near the stove, stacked wood high. Through the night she carved, each cut sure, rhythmic, a horse inching toward wholeness under firelight. At dawn she held it out. 4 legs, head bent to drink, grain lines flowing like water. Luke touched the small figure, warm, alive in ways wood should not be. He took a branding iron from the mantel, his father's mark, and placed it in her hand. She examined the scarred metal, eyes searching. He pointed to himself, then to her. Family, if she wished it. Her fingers tightened around the iron. No answer yet. But breath came easier, and that was its own reply. Snow whispered against the window. 2 survivors shared the quiet. A new story began in the hush. Wind sharpened. January stamped drifts waist-high across the prairie. Luke hauled bales, broke ice in the trough, then returned to find the small wooden horse balanced on the table, newly stained the color of chestnut bark. Beside it lay a scrap of paper. Evangeline's handwriting leaned left, letters careful but firm. If a horse drinks, it stands. He looked toward the hearth. She nodded once, challenge in her winter blue eyes. She wanted to stand, wanted more than chair and blanket. Luke spent 3 evenings in the barn shaping ash into crutch frames, sanding until splinters yielded smooth grain. He fitted padded grips, cut iron rings for durability. On the 4th dusk, he brought them inside, set them upright against the wall, and stepped back. Evangeline reached for the nearer crutch, tested weight with cautious fingers, then grasped both. Luke kept distance, spotting without hovering. She planted tips on pine, braced elbows, tightened shoulders. Her right leg shifted, knee locking straight by instinct alone. The left stayed numb. Sweat beaded at her brow. She lifted 1 inch, 2. Boots scraped, but gravity won. She sagged into the chair, breath jagged, face pale. Luke crouched, offered water. She refused with a gentle shake and picked up the carving knife instead. Birch chips fell like snow until her pulse settled. That night, Luke traced new wheels on the crutch pads, proof of use, not failure. The next morning brought company, Walt Dunning, rancher from the South Flat, coat dusted white. He stomped into the doorway, hat in hand, voice rolling hard. "Harper, storm cut my fence. Cattle drifted, need hands." Luke glanced at Evangeline. She sat by the window, hands folded. Her nod was slight, but clear. Go. Snow drove needles against Luke's coat as he rode south. Drifts swallowed posts. Black hides moved like shadows in pale distance. Luke and Walt coaxed the herd home through thigh-deep powder, hooves crunching ice till dusk bled rust across the sky. When Luke returned, lantern light glowed through chinks. Inside, stew simmered. Evangeline slept upright, crutches resting beside her like loyal dogs. On the table lay a new carving. Two horses, heads touching, rails between them broken away. He ate quietly, every spoonful a vow. Days spun into terse, bright cold. Evangeline practiced with crutches 5 minutes each hour. She measured progress in breaths, in the extra second her right knee held, in the first tremor of feeling that flickered down her left calf before fading like a shy spark. Luke added cross-bracing to the ramp, widened door frames, and rigged a lariat pulley in the barn rafters, an improvised sling to hoist a rider into a saddle. He said nothing of its purpose. She noticed the new rope, the counterweight keg filled with gravel, and said nothing as well. Trust is built in unsaid things. February thaw teased, then fled. One night a gunshot cracked across the valley. Single report, then echo. Luke grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. In moonlight, he saw movement near the well. Two figures, one limping, one steady. They vanished behind the shed. He rounded the corner. A colt lay tangled in barbed wire, hide glistening dark. The figures emerged. Boys from town, Karlman twins, reputation for cruelty. They saw Luke's rifle and scattered into shadow, leaving tracks that vanished in drifting snow. Luke knelt by the colt. Wire had sliced tendon, blood steamed. He needed extra hands. He ran to the house, burst in. Evangeline looked up, alarm flaring. He pointed to her crutches, then forged the shape of a rope with his hands. Help. She set jaw, gripped wood, rose. Steps slow, stiff. Outside, wind burned her face raw. Together they cut wire, pressed rags tight, poured whiskey to clean the gash. Colt trembled but stayed. Evangeline's right leg held, left dragged useless in snow. She shifted weight, braced with one crutch, whispered strokes on the animal's neck until his shudder eased. They bound the leg, led the colt inside the barn. Only then did Luke see Evangeline's sleeve, blood where Metalthorn had grazed her arm. She met his worried stare, shook her head, and reached for his shirt cuff instead. Blood there too. She pressed her palm to his forearm, silent order to sit. Under lantern glow, she cleaned his cut first. Small mercy, larger than words. Midnight slipped past. When she finally sank into her chair, exhaustion folded her frame, but her eyes shone fierce. Outside, the colt nickered, alive, steadied. Storms passed. March sun bled warmth into thawing earth. Evangeline managed 3 full strides on crutches before knees buckled. Luke chalked a line on the floor. Goalpost. Each day she edged closer, wood tapping like slow applause. Luke saddled the gelding by the barn, secured the pulley sling, and waited. Evangeline arrived, breath clouding in cold air, gaze steady. He gestured an offer. She studied tackle and rope, the height of the saddle, the distance between today and what once was. Then she shook her head. Not yet. Luke untied the rig, but hope hung like scent of lilac on wind still smelling of snow. Late March brought the Sunday social, first since winter's bite. Church hall lanterns beckoned. Townsfolk craved music and gossip. Luke hitched the wagon and lined bed with quilts. He lifted Evangeline aboard, crutches tucked at her side. She wore a scarf the color of sunrise, cheeks bright from achievement and fear. Inside the hall, chatter hushed. Eyes tracked the pair. Luke felt the weight of judgments. Pitied bride, foolish cowboy. He set Evangeline near the stove, fetched 2 cups of coffee, ignored whispers. Mrs. Alder, town midwife, approached with a plate. Cornbread, she offered. Evangeline met her gaze, smiled. Small, sincere. Mrs. Alder's shoulders softened. She placed a gentle hand on Evangeline's arm before moving on. Music started. Fiddle and guitar. Boots shuffled. Luke tapped rhythm on his knee. Evangeline's fingers matched the beat on her cup, almost dancing. A young girl skipped over, asked if the stranger wanted pie. Evangeline nodded, wrote "thank you" in the frosted window pane with her fingertip. The child giggled, ran off. Barriers cracked, bit by bit. Toward evening, the Karlman twins slunk in, bruised pride still nursing. They sneered, made a crude joke. Silence fell. Luke stood, fists clenched. Before conflict sparked, Evangeline lifted one crutch, tapped the wooden floor twice. Sharp, deliberate. The sound sliced tension cleaner than any fist. The twins backed away, muttering. Applause rose from tables, subtle but powerful. Luke sat, throat thick. Evangeline's eyes glinted, steel tempered by mercy. Outside, stars climbed. Luke drove home, wagon wheels crunching frost. Halfway, Evangeline tapped his arm, pointed skyward. A meteor split darkness, bright and gone. She made a motion, two fingers stroking air, the carving gesture. Future possibilities. Luke smiled into the wind. April thaw turned creek fierce. Fences needed mending across swollen banks. Luke saddled the gelding and paused. Evangeline sat on the porch, carving knife resting idle. He nodded toward the barn sling. Question asked anew. She inhaled, steady, nodded. Inside, she positioned under the pulley. Luke looped the canvas under her arms, braced her waist. Rope creaked. Gravel keg counterbalanced. She rose inches, then feet. He guided her above the saddle. She gripped horn. When her weight settled, he released the sling. Horse stamped, but held. Fear flickered in her eyes, then steadied into determination. Luke led the gelding in slow circles. She clutched mane, back straightening, right leg braced, left dangled, but no matter. Circle widened. Outside the barn, sunlit pale grass. Luke stepped away. The horse walked on. Evangeline solo for the first time since cruel vows. Tears streaked her face. Pain, relief, rebirth all at once. Luke matched her pace, hand hovering near stirrup but not touching. Trust-ridden, not carried. At the far gate, she dropped reins, reached to sky, palms open. Wind answered, warm at last. The horse turned back toward the barn, hooves muffled by new grass. Evangeline kept her hands wide, letting wind thread between aching fingers. Luke walked beside, boots silent, ready if balance betrayed her. It did not. When they reached the sling, she gripped the horn, exhaled, and allowed him to guide her down. Her legs shook, but pride held steadier than muscle. Next dawn she returned, alone, crutches scraping earth, determination louder than crow calls. Luke watched from the porch. She looped the sling herself, hauled her weight skyward, settled into the saddle, and steered the gelding 3 cautious circles. A 4th. Sun climbed, so did her confidence. By week's end, she rode the fence line while Luke hammered posts. He glanced up at intervals, measuring distance between yesterday and today. Each sighting carved something heavy from his chest, replacing it with something light. Spring markets opened in town. Evangeline packed her wooden carvings, horses small enough for a child's fist, each branded with a tiny comet streak, into a sack sewn from the blanket she no longer needed. She rode beside Luke in the wagon, dust billowing behind. At the square, children clustered around the table, coins clinking. Mrs. Alder praised the clean lines. Walt Dunning's youngest traced the comet mark, whispered it was a wish frozen in wood. By noon, the sack lay empty, replaced by a tin of quarters and folded bills. Evangeline handed the money to the church carpenter. A ramp soon rose along the chapel steps, pine-smelling of fresh hope. On Sunday, she entered without aid. Hymn smoke and cedar greeted her like long-lost kin. Whispered scandal turned to nods of respect. Early June heat shimmered over the pasture. Luke cut wire from a lightning-shattered post when rattles buzzed under sage. Strike. Fangs found his forearm. He crushed the snake with a boot heel, but poison already crawled. He wrapped the wound, staggered to the barn, vision tunneling. Evangeline met him halfway, took one look, and swung into the saddle. She guided the gelding toward town at a trot that bruised her spine but spared no second. Dust seared her lungs. At the creek ford, she leaned, scooped water, soaked her scarf, tied it around Luke's arm to slow the burn. Town rose wavering on the horizon, mirage made real by will. She dismounted before the doctor's door, pounded wood with the flat of a crutch until hinges rattled. The old man hurried out, saw the bleeding rancher draped over the saddle, and forgot to ask how the paralyzed bride had galloped 6 miles alone. Night fell before Luke's fever broke. During the wait, Evangeline sat on the clinic floor, back against plaster, legs numb, knife clamped in hand as if carving air into courage. When the doctor nodded, relief wrung silent tears she wiped on her sleeve. They returned home at dawn, Luke pale but breathing, Evangeline swaying from exhaustion she dared not show. He reached for her hand. She let their fingers rest together over the horn the last mile. Recovery crept like shade at noon. Luke's strength flickered, returned. During those days, Evangeline hoisted buckets, split kindling one-handed, and coaxed the colt's scarred leg into steady gait. She attached a small bell to her crutch so he could hear her move through rooms. Proof he was not alone. One restless evening, she carved a meteor, twin tails crossing, two paths meeting in flame. She placed it on the windowsill beside his bed. Luke traced the groove silently, understanding more than any sermon could teach. When he stood unaided again, he found a ledger on the table. Sales of her carvings, every coin tallied. On the last line, she had written a single word: future. He added another word beneath: hours. Outside, wheat heads ripened, nodding heavy in warm wind. They walked to the cottonwood ramp, side by side, steps uneven yet in rhythm. Sky burned orange. Far ridges hummed with crickets sharpening night. Evangeline set the twin-tailed comet on a fence post. Luke laid his father's old pocket watch beside it, unwound at last. Together they watched sun dip. Time paused and promise glow ember bright between wood and iron. The prairie listened and approved. Dawn seeped pale across the wheat. Luke hitched the wagon. Evangeline swung into the driver's seat, crutches strapped behind. They headed east toward Miller's Mill, first harvest run of the season. Grain rustled in the bed, a gold sea caught in wooden walls. Along the road, meadowlarks stitched music into breeze. At the mill, Foreman Dean climbed the scales, whistle between teeth. He eyed Luke's sacks, then Evangeline's steady posture. "Weight's light," he grumbled. "Damp kernels." Luke frowned. "Fields stayed dry." Dean shrugged. "Rules changed. New rate." A murmur, ripple among waiting farmers. Dean shaved weights all morning. Anger flared, but Luke measured the crowd. Fear edged every face. No one dared confront the mill's lone buyer. Evangeline climbed down, retrieving a small comet-carved horse from her satchel. She placed it on Dean's scale, right atop the measurement weight. Its presence tipped needle by half a pound. Chuckles sparked. Dean's smirk faltered. She handed him the figure. Dean flipped it in his palm, scorn rising, but paused at the clean workmanship, the mark of twin tails. A farmer near the chute whispered that one carving sold for more than a sack of flour last fair. Dean's greed glinted. He lifted the horse for the line to admire, then reset the scale properly. "Reading stands," he muttered. "Fair weight after all." Grain poured, dust rising sweet. Luke squeezed Evangeline's hand. A silent laugh shared. Justice needn't shout. Harvest weeks blurred. Field, mill, field again. Evangeline's right leg strengthened. Left tingled now and then, lightening under skin. Each night she massaged the calf, coaxing nerves awake. Luke built parallel bars in the barn. She practiced, sweat darkening linen, jaw set. One afternoon a shudder ran through her left foot, first voluntary twitch. She stopped, eyes wide, tears sharp. Luke saw and did not speak. He only opened his arms. She let herself fall into them, shoulders shaking, crutch bell chiming a small triumph. September's sun baked earth. The county fair arrived, bigger than last year. Evangeline's booth overflowed with comet horses, meteors, small wheat sheaves bound by twine. Children lined, coins ready. Kellerman twins loitered at distance, shame aging them. When their sister Clara wheeled to the table, leg broken from a fall, they shuffled close. Evangeline offered a carving shaped like a colt learning to stand. Clara smiled shyly. The twins whispered a thanks rough as gravel. Across the green, a banker's tent drew ranchers with promises of cheap seed loans. Luke listened, suspicion coiling. Interest hid like barbed wire in tall grass. Days later, letters arrived. Overdue taxes, evaluation notices. Luke cursed the banker's timing. He and Evangeline rode to the courthouse. Clerk explained valuations rose with land's worth. Rail spur planned, speculation boiling. Pay or lose acreage at auction. Luke's jaw hardened. Evangeline listened, eyes calm. Outside, she traced numbers in dust. Cost, savings, carving income. Short by $40. Night found Luke staring at ledger, rage circling useless. Eve Evangeline placed her carving knife beside the twin-tailed comet. Signal. She would sell personal pieces, the first horse she carved when legs still numb. Luke protested. She silenced him with fingertips to his lips. Sacrifice sometimes speaks louder than pride. Auction day dawned bitter. Town square buzzed. Luke approached the steps, tax envelope in hand, still lacking $10. Banker Raleigh fingered pocket watch, smirk poised. A bell jangled. Clara Kellerman's chair rolled forward, twins pushing. She held a pouch. Dad says debt of kindness paid. Twins nodded, cheeks red but resolved. Within, 10 silver dollars. Luke's throat closed. He looked to Evangeline. She nodded, eyes wet. Envelope sealed, taxes cleared. Raleigh's smirk cracked. Sun climbed. Luke bought lemonade for Kellerman's, laughter easing scars. Evangeline gifted Clara the first twin-tailed horse, worth more than any coin. Balance at last. October's edge brought storms. Lightning split the ridge one night, igniting dry grass near Walt Dunning's ranch. Flames roared toward his house, family trapped. Evangeline heard distant thunder, face blanching, but she stood, both feet finding floor. Crutches under arms, she summoned Luke. They rode through sheets of rain, joined bucket line. Evangeline directed children, crutch bell-cutting chaos like command chime. Luke and Walt hacked fire breaks. Dawn revealed charred earth, house standing, livestock alive. Walt clasped Evangeline's shoulders. You saved more than timber tonight. She smiled soft, tears mixing with soot. Luke squeezed her hand. Sparks danced behind his ribs. That evening, she stepped unaided between parallel barn bars, 5 paces before legs quit. Hope tasted real. Prairie exhaled. Frost crept back, drawing silver veins through pasture grass. Evangeline woke before dawn, feet tingling, steady glow, not stabbing sparks. She placed them flat, shifted weight. Pain flickered but yielded. No crutches, one cautious step, another. Wood groaned yet held. She pushed the door open. Moon lingered, thin and pale. Luke slept in the rocker, hat tipped, exhaustion softened by quiet joy. She crossed the room, each step disbelief made real, and laid the comet carving in his lap. His eyes opened, widened. A breath caught between gratitude and awe. Morning found them in the barn. Luke removed the parallel bars. Work now finished. He hung them in rafters, monument to stubborn hope. Evangeline saddled the gelding alone, swung into the seat without sling. Hooves drummed frost, cutting ribbons through dawn fog. They rode fence line in silence, the easy kind that hums like low hymn. At Creek Bend, they dismounted. Water mirrored sunrise, comet tails streaked in gold. Luke produced a small tin box. Inside, his mother's ring, platinum dulled by years. He held it out, no speech rehearsed, only the steady tremor of a man asking without words. Evangeline removed her worn borrowed band, set it on a flat stone, and let the creek carry mockery downstream. She offered her hand. Luke slid the ring home. Fit perfect, promise bright. Harper? He asked, voice rough. She touched his chest, then hers. Yes, but her fingers traced something more. An H stroked into an E, melding letters into a new shape neither alone could hold. Harperling, he whispered, a name born from two, unmarred by joke or pity. They rode back under rising sun, faces warmed by more than light. At the gate, Walt Dunning waited with a wagon load of fresh boards, gift to rebuild stalls. Behind him, Kellerman twins, Clara and Cher, each holding a hammer. Mrs. Alder arrived with seed bags, banker Raleigh sheepish, deed in hand, striking off speculative liens. Community stitched itself into family one plank, one nail at a time. Evangeline guided volunteers, ramps here, wider doors there, trough lower for foals. She walked the new barn aisle, cane only for balance now, bell retired, children chased kittens through hay. The comet horse carvings decorated rafters, each tail streaking hope across timber. October's last night hosted the harvest gathering under lantern strings. Fiddle bow slid gentle. Guitar answered. Evangeline entered the cleared floor, cane-tapping measure. Luke met her halfway. Silence gathered, not heavy but expectant. They moved. Slow waltz, her left foot cautious but true. Crowd breathed as one. Midway she released the cane. Walt caught it before it fell. Gasps melted into applause, thick as summer thunder. Evangeline and Luke pivoted, two meteors crossing. Music faded. Hush swelled. Evangeline raised a hand, steady, no tremor, and signed the twin-tailed comet in air. Clara mirrored the sign. Children followed, painting sky with invisible light. Luke faced the circle of neighbors. Mockery brought us together, he said, voice clear. Mercy kept us. If quiet courage touches you, carry it onward. He gestured to the cottonwood near the ramp. Fresh boards nailed there formed a new sign. Comet Ranch. Letters cut by every hand that once pointed in scorn, now carving pride. Lanterns flickered. Stars answered. Somewhere a meteor burned itself glorious against the dark. Luke wrapped an arm around Evangeline. She leaned into him, heart beating stronger than violin strings. Their feet found stillness while world turned, small as a carving, yet vast as prairie night. A hush settled, perfect pocket where gratitude breathes. Luke lifted his voice one last time, soft enough for embers to hear. If this story lit a spark in you, tip your hat with a like, hitch your wagon by subscribing, and ride back when the next quiet miracle sets the sky on fire. Silence held, full and warm, then claps rose, crickets sang. Life marched on beneath a sky that now seemed closer, kinder. Where ridicule once stood, roots dug deep, and every comet streaking westward carried their names.